Welcome to this week's episode with me, Daisy Adams. Here at the Cricket Coaching Code podcast, we've recently teamed up with Cricket.jobs, a team who are not only highly motivated to find you the ideal job within cricket, but they will also ensure the right people apply for your environment. We've partnered up with them because I've always wondered what is out there in the worldwide market, and I couldn't find a one-stop shop that brings them all together. Now I have. Head over to cricket.jobs to see the latest opportunities. So let's get into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Cricket Coaching Code podcast. This week we are joined by Jody Martins, somebody who slightly different to our usual cricket coaching guests, but we are really pleased to have him on with us, and hopefully we'll take the conversation in areas that will provoke thought for our coaches out there, and I'm sure it will provoke a lot of thought to me as well. So, introducing him, Jody. Jody, how are you? Good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, I'm very good. I'm very excited to be here. I haven't been on a podcast in a while, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation, and not just seeing the value that I could add, but also potentially what I could gain from you. I think that's always a good place to start from.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to have you on, noting that you are the host of your own podcast, The Performance Formula, that you've established. Yeah. Tell us what you've been working on then. Tell us what's most recent for you.
Well, currently I'm sort of in a little bit of a waiting period. I coached cricket for 25 years. Okay. I think I coached cricket. And so for the last 3 or 4 years, and at that time, for about 13, 14 years, I did mental performance in a very part-time capacity. And so for the last 3 to 4 years, since COVID essentially, if it wasn't for COVID, I think I would have still been coaching cricket. But COVID came and we were sort of stuck here where I'm staying in this small town, and my wife and I just decided, no, we need a life change. We need to get out of the city, the hustle and bustle of Joburg, move down to the coast. And so for the last 4 years, I've been predominantly focusing on mental performance for all athletes, really, but always cricket seems to be a focus because that's sort of the world I come from. And then at the same time, during COVID, I started my podcast, and I'm about 140 episodes in.
Strong.
And sort of loving that, still learning, still enjoying the conversations, and trying to understand how people get to perform at their best at the end of the day.
Okay, so there's a couple of strands I think that I'm going to take it down. The first one then, let's pick up on your coaching journey and your coaching history within cricket. How did you start off, and where did you sort of go with it?
I was not a bad student at school. I was like top of my class. I was good at math, good at science, good at accounting. But the cricket bug bit me when I was about 13 years old. And by the age of 16, I realized I'm not going to be good enough at playing this game. And this weird thing happened in school because I was such a sort of top student, essentially. A lot of people would, friends, etc., would come to me during exam times and wanted me to help them. Okay. And so I ended up teaching/coaching them through all the things that they're struggling with. And I think so from there, with the love for cricket, with this kind of coaching, teaching approach at school. So around the age of 16, I decided I wanted to coach cricket. Okay. I'm not going to go study. I'm not going to, go to a university. I want to pursue this cricket thing. Yep. And so I started coaching cricket at the age of 16 at my local club on a Saturday morning. I in those days, I coached under 7s. I had like 30 under 7 kids all by myself. Absolute craziness, but loved every minute of it. And, then the journey started. So it was doing the level 1, the Cricket South Africa level 1, then the level 2, the level 3. And around 2005, I got involved in coach education, and so I still currently present at the Cricket South Africa level 3 and 4s.
Yep.
And I just coached. I just loved coaching. I had my own coaching business, predominantly did private coaching. My speciality, I would say, was always batting. So
Okay.
I had the privilege of working with some cricketers who are now playing first-class cricket that sort of
Yep.
came through our academy. Yeah, I mean, that's it really in a nutshell. I can get into more details, but it was basically just love for the game and this teaching thing, coaching thing that I was doing at school, and that sort of got me into it.
So let's
Yeah.
pick up on then. You've used the word a couple of times, that love for cricket, that love for coaching. What do you think was your connection with your passion for coaching, for developing people? Have you ever thought about that as to where your connection was in terms of wanting to be a coach and what you were getting from coaching that sort of fueled your soul?
Initially, it was definitely a dream to coach at the highest levels.
Yep.
That was the immediate, like when I was 13 and I was thinking about playing the game, it was I want to play for South Africa.
Yep.
When I realized I couldn't play for South Africa, I was like, I'm going to coach South Africa.
Yep.
So it was an immediate sort of, yeah, just a high vision. And I think over time, I sort of got woken up to the realities
Okay.
of it might not be that easy.
Yep.
So that was the youth sort of the initial. And I think what it's become over time is to this day, whether it's mental performance or whether it's cricket coaching, and I had did a bit of cricket coaching in the last year for about 6 months abroad. And I think what I get from it now is really, and maybe have been for the last 15 years, has been a deep satisfaction. I've always been fascinated with, how do you actually make somebody better? Because initially I was like, I want to coach South Africa. I believe I can get anybody there. You come to me, I will coach you to play
Yep.
international cricket. Again, realized very early on, it's not that easy. And so, but at the same point in time, I was fascinated with how do you get people to become good? How do you make them better? And so I think as a coach, when I get to experience that through my own evolving as a coach in my style, in my methodology, in sort of how I go about what I do, and seeing the impact that has on cricketers and human beings, to them actually performing, that satisfaction from just knowing you played a part. And hey, with some cricketers, like there's a whole bunch of cricketers I would have coached up until about the age of 13, and then they would leave. They would go to schools that are far away. And now there's, I think, 2 cricketers that are a part of some SA under 19 emerging academy. And I'm like, well, I worked with these kids, when they were young. And when you phone those parents, they like acknowledge what you do, but there's also the understanding that you were just one cog in that wheel. You know, there's more coaches that have added. There's more. The parents have added. Teachers at school have added. Their friends have added. Teams that they played in. Opportunities that they had. And so I think just that satisfaction of knowing, that cricketer is over there. They're on TV, or you see a scorecard and you see, wow, they're actually doing the business, and I played a part in that. That satisfaction, I think, that sells it for me most of the time.
Yeah, I think that's quite passionate in you. I can see that that comes across, and I think reflecting on what you said there about I want to play cricket for South Africa, followed by I want to coach for South Africa. Your level of expectation setting within you is probably quite high, and I can imagine that you try and do everything that you do in your life to the very best that you can. But let's go into the part that you mentioned about your connection with the mental performance, and where you kind of then transitioned from coaching into the sort of space where you are now. Can you just talk to us about that, please?
Yeah, so I mean, again, it was something that happened early on in my cricket coaching. So within, say, the first year or two of coaching cricket, I was maybe 18, 19, 20 at the time. I realized, hang on, I'm working with Johnny over there and Paul over there, and I'm doing the same sort of stuff. Yet Johnny is looking like he's becoming something and Paul is not.
Yep.
And I was curious as to why does that happen? Why is it that my approach doesn't change much? And so why is it that the one becomes good and the other, or better at least, maybe not good at that time? And so that fascinated me with like what's sitting behind this. And so I started exploring. I delved into biomechanics. I delved into nutrition. I delved into the strength and conditioning stuff, trying to figure out what is the differentiator, and all those things definitely play a part. But for me, my answer was I found that the mental side, the brain, how these two cricketers think about themselves, how they think about the people that they play against and compete against, like that is such a big influencer on how they develop. And so I always use the example, I can have 2 6-year-olds in the net and I throw them balls. I throw them little underarm balls off a couple of steps. And they would most probably, if they've never played cricket, they'd most probably miss a high volume of those balls.
Yep.
And what you would find is that one cricketer would go, "Oh, geez, throw me some more." And another one would go, "Oh, I suck at this,"
Yep.
And so that immediate response with the game actually sets up everything else that follows. And that started fascinating me. And then it took me about 10 years to find sort of because I'm not a psychologist. I'll never claim to be one. To find sort of a coaching philosophy and a coaching methodology that allows me to understand where sort of people are at from a mental point of view, and to help them, facilitate them towards sort of strategies in which firstly they can understand themselves better, like who they are as a performer, and then secondly how they can become consistent with that. How do I show up consistently as almost the best version of me, rather than just hoping that it happens by chance.
There's lots to think about. I've made a few notes, and we will come back to it. But I'm going to ask sort of the bottom line up front question. What to you is high performance then?
It's a good question, and I think I've often asked myself that question.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've got a concrete answer.
Okay.
Because to some people, high performance is a gym at a school, and we can take human bodies and get them really fit, and we call that high performance. To some people, it's micromanaging their lives and writing down what they eat and sort of packaging everything to a level where it might irritate a lot of people.
Yep.
I think high performance to me is when an individual can understand what it is that actually has them at their best, and they are then willing to do the things they need to do in order to be in that place as often as possible. Maybe by way of a simple explanation, I refer to it as sort of your cocktail. Like what's in your cocktail? If you think of, and maybe this isn't relevant to young young cricketers listening into the conversation. Maybe think about how you mix your tea or your coffee or something like that. But if you buy a sort of a cocktail at a bar, coaches will hopefully understand this. But you buy a cocktail at a bar. If there's a mixture of things that's in there that creates the perfect drink in inverted commas. And so I believe every athlete has a cocktail, but the cocktail for every athlete is not, they're not the same. And so I think when athletes spend time to understand like what's actually in my cocktail, like how fit do I have to be? What is my best mindset? What are, say, the core skill things that I need to make sure is in place in my game? And, if those skill things are in place, then more often than not, a whole bunch of other things fall in place. And my perception is that not enough athletes or cricketers spend enough time to understand this. I had a gymnast on my podcast, and she was explaining how she's a Cirque du Soleil gymnast, so she's got like 10 shows a week. And she was explaining how on show days, she eats very specific things.
Yep.
And I was like, wow. Like, I think that's incredible to know that about yourself. She hangs in the air and swings off ropes and does all these things. And she's like, when I'm up there, I don't want an upset stomach. I don't want my stomach to feel weird. And I know that there's certain food that when I eat it, it upsets my stomach and it makes me have an uncomfortable experience. And if there's certain food that when I eat it, it actually makes me feel better. And so on show days, I only eat that food. And I'm like, well, to me, that's high performance. You understand yourself deeply enough, and then you make sure that you do that so that you can be at your best in performance.
I think your metaphor there of cocktail is really interesting, because it got me thinking. And to use the cocktail analogy, and to take it back to its purest form, sometimes I am a espresso martini person. Sometimes I'm an old-fashioned person. Sometimes I'll enjoy a pina colada. So when you think about understanding what is in that cocktail for you in the context and the environment of what you're trying to achieve, you could be very different needs to go into that cocktail to achieve what you do need to achieve. But having that, and relating it back to what you said, having that awareness of what's on the menu, what do I need to pick, what do I need to do, what ingredients do I need, we need to have that written down and understood. And I really do believe that self-awareness for who you are, what mask you're wearing, or what you're presenting to the environment that you're about to go and execute in, it may be very different on different occasions, on different days, in order to get the best cocktail that you need to present. And self-awareness is, for me, a huge part of that journey. And actually, I'm not too sure if you've read it or come across it, but Shane Watson's book is really good, and I listened to it on an audio book because he narrates it. And there was so much in there that he was really open and honest and said, I didn't get to the stage I got to until really late on in life, and I wasn't aware of myself. And I was playing cricket at international standard, but I wasn't aware. I didn't understand myself. I didn't understand how I worked, or what I needed to work on, or what I needed to think about, how I needed to think about it. And the real tough part is when you're in those adverse conditions, how do you get yourself back into that mindset, that mind state, in order to, one, control it, and two, to bring it back down into those, in those certain areas where you then become effective. So I'm going to ask a question, and I think you have covered it on a reflection piece in your podcast, and it goes back to something that you initially said in that little bit there about age. So clearly, sort of the age and stage of the person that you're working with, and their sort of maturity levels. But at what sort of age do you think bringing in mental skills and that self-awareness, how can you do it with a younger player?
Yeah, it's tough. And I agree with what you say, right? That age and maturity matters. So I wouldn't want to pin a specific age and say, well, it's at the age of 11.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what changed or shifted my mind on this was my own son. When my son was 5 years old, I remember that we could, at that age, sit with him and sort of have conversations where you could ask him a question and he could answer it. And so I think that's sort of an important distinction to make, is that when you ask somebody a question and they cannot answer it, because either they don't know how to answer it, or maybe they're not ready to answer it yet, then self-awareness, I think, becomes really difficult. I mean, I've listened and I've had people on my podcast asking them the same question, like, how do you make people self-aware? And for me, the only way to really do that is by asking a question. If you ask yourself a question about yourself, then you can reflect on that. You can look within to find the answer. You can get feedback, but we're not always open to feedback. Some of us resist feedback. A coach says something to you, and then maybe so just the question, like, well, is that really me? Am I really that? When somebody says something about me. But what we tend to do is we say, oh, they say this about me, and we become defensive. And so I think that ability to ask ourselves questions of ourselves is the key. It is the thing that opens the door to self-awareness. And so I wouldn't want to put an age on it, but I would say that that's a way to test, No. Tell me, what do you think when you're standing out there batting? They might just say, I don't think anything. Okay, great. That's true for a lot of athletes, that they don't think anything, Well, do you sometimes think stuff? Yeah, I sometimes think stuff. Okay, what do you think? And so then you can sort of start getting into those conversations about what's actually happening on the inside of the person. Or what do you feel? Okay, well, I feel ABC. Okay, you feel nervous. Okay, where does the nervousness come from? And so the more you can sort of ask questions about these things and they can answer them, then I think you can start working in that space. When they can't answer it and they kind of like either don't know or they maybe not ready yet, maybe developmentally they haven't reached that sort of stage where they can have that level of awareness, well, then I think it's best to not sort of scratch on it or pursue it too much. Like leave it be, check in a while again,
I think that's a really powerful question as a coach, and I ask it all the time. What were you thinking when? What were you thinking when you did that? And it's surprising how many times the response is, well, I wasn't thinking about what I was either supposed to be or what was relevant, and that's the first indicator of for me that the mental kind of agility and discipline probably isn't there, and that's when we need to start unpicking that and working on it. But I'll go back to something you said there about your becoming a father and your child. I'll share with you. So it's that classic: put your child to bed, and they want to ask 100,000 questions, from do potatoes grow overground or underground? And my daughter said to me, "Where does love come from?" And it really put me on the back foot. And it absolutely put me on the back foot to say, okay, how do I explain to a 5-year-old, where love comes from? And I thought, okay, I need to really answer this one, and took it back to the sort of happiness and sad and those two feelings, and then we talked about it. But something that that you also mentioned there, and since becoming a father, and sometimes this is really difficult, as I'm sure you've experienced, as have our listeners. Being a dad gives me every single opportunity to be a coach and to ask questions of my children. And I've got a 3-year-old who, on 1 minute, she'll count up to 30. The next minute, she will ask the most ridiculous, horrendous questions that, again, put you on the back foot. But those opportunities to take yourself into the coaching space with your children can be really powerful with them, to get them just thinking about their own emotions and their own thoughts. And something that you must remember when you come out of school and, what did you do today? I don't know. The questions I've started asking her is, what did you do that made you feel happy? What did you do that made you feel sad? And those two simple questions, it's surprising how quickly a child will connect with feelings, because that is what is growing, what is developing them. And like you, I'm no psychologist, but it becomes really powerful when you're able to start making them emotionally aware, and that to me starts developing a little bit of self-awareness and having that ability to reflect. Now the hardest part is clearly providing the feedback to a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, but feedback, as you say, sometimes can be difficult, no matter what hat you're wearing in your life. Sometimes the sort of hard, cold truth of feedback, but it's how we deliver it and how we frame it and how we land it and when we land it that I think is really quite key and important. So let's pick up on that then. Have you seen anything, or have you, through your engagement with other people, picked up on ways how to go about providing feedback to people, or how to take feedback? Is that anything that you've looked at from the sort of mental side of it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think feedback to me is a high level coaching skill,
Okay.
an ability to provide. I like to refer to it as high quality feedback because, and I want to make a distinction here because often people speak about criticism. I want positive criticism. Personally, that, like, I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me, right? Because criticism is still criticism. It doesn't matter how you deliver it.
Yep.
And criticism, we can't always, whether it's positive or negative, it's not always that easy to work with criticism because it's somebody else's judgment or opinion of you. And so I think the ability to provide high quality feedback is a high level coaching skill. I'm not giving you my opinion. And so the first thing that I want to maybe just add on there that you said is my words would be that it's all about timing. Feedback is all about timing. As soon as possible is important, but also readiness. So if it's soon, but the cricketer or the person that you're wanting to give the feedback to isn't ready for it, it doesn't matter that it's in the right time, but it's not at the right time. So the person's not ready to receive the feedback. And so what I would normally do, especially if I know the feedback could potentially be a little bit contentious in some way, is to say, hey, I've got some feedback for you. Are you ready to receive it? And so you check with the person on the feedback rather than just say, hey, come here, I need to speak with you, Say, hey, I got some feedback for you. And normally it would help if you can let them know what it's about. Hey, I've got some feedback for you about your behavior that I noticed on the field today. Is it okay that we talk about that? Great. Let's go. They might say, I'm not ready. Will you let me know when you are? If they say they're ready for it, then what makes a distinction for me between criticism, whether positive or negative, and high quality feedback is that high quality feedback is sensory based.
Okay.
It's what do I see? What do I hear? And if feelings are involved, it's not the emotional feeling like I feel sad or upset. It's the feeling that you would have on your skin, like and often in sport, that type of feeling isn't necessarily relevant, especially in cricket. But maybe say in a sport like, I'm thinking of basketball where you're doing defensive maneuvers, or rugby or something like that, where teammates are touching each other and there's physical touch. You can say, hey, I feel you pressing in this place, or I feel your weight over here, or, whatever. That's where that would be relevant. So high quality feedback is, I see this, I hear this, I feel this. I observe, I notice. It's that type of language so that you make things behavioral, because with that we can work. I see you dragging your feet, your pants are halfway down your legs, your head is bowed down. Then I could say, that makes me think that you're not interested. So we attach the behavior to my thought or my opinion about that. Or, hey, in our team, remember we said we want to keep our heads high, especially when we're failing. So I'm noticing in you. And normally if there's a little video or something like that that could show that, then we just enhance that experience of the feedback given. There might be a couple other things on feedback, but they're slipping my head.
Okay, yeah,
they're slipping my head right now. And I think those would be the most important things, like check for readiness and make it as sensory as possible so that it's the see, hear, feel about it.
So my other sort of involvement, I say involved, it's my profession. I'm in the military in the UK, and involved in aviation, and I look at how aircrew, how pilots go through their sort of process in terms of high performance, and a key part to that is the debrief. Now, in aviation, we have a quite an open, an honest, transparent culture, and I think that has been developed through through many years of unfortunate occurrences, accidents, incidents, and it's sort of forced us down that route for the very right reasons. But the whole part of the debrief, when we are being open and transparent, we're providing that feedback with a level of security and psychological safety within that team, within that group. And it's something I've discussed with quite a few people as to how you establish psychological safety within a team. And trust keeps coming back up to how the relationships are strong enough to be able to have that interaction. Have you seen, through high performance and high performing teams as opposed to high performing individuals, an element of that psychological safety existing or trying to be established? And I suppose on the flip side of that, if it hasn't been established, has it had sort of a bit of an effect on a team's ability to be a high performing team? Is that something you've looked at?
100%. I'm actually busy. I hope it's not a bad thing that I'm punting my podcast in between, but I'm actually busy having a long conversation with one of my friends. We did a series earlier in the year where we followed the South African cricket team through the World Cup, and we're actually busy unpacking the spirit of cricket.
Great.
What it means,
Yeah.
What does it actually mean? And so one of the conversations so far that we've had is specifically around relationships and how that can enhance performance and how that is the essence of the spirit of cricket. Teams that are happy, where there is high psychological safety, where there's high trust, I think it's easier for players to go from a mental performance point of view. When a player is at their best, they feel a sense of freedom. They're relaxed and they're calm and they can go out and play. Right? I think when there's high trust, high psychological safety in an environment, then more often than not, to make failures, you won't be sort of belittled or shouted at. It'll be allowed to a certain extent. There will be freedom, right? And so when that is within an environment, naturally athletes perform better. My sense about it is, and so part of our conversation was that a lot of the time, though, this stuff is built on a facade. A lot of cricketers make the career, the end goal, the winning of a World Cup, especially within the South African context, where we've struggled with that. That becomes the be all and end all for the cricketer, and so now the environment's safety diminishes because now it becomes about me. I'm not here to add value to others, and so it's about me. I've got to become protective, and so if we're all like this, well, then we're not free to play. I'm not walking out expressing myself freely in a team that wants to see that of me. We're all sort of closed off little boxes of people trying to be our best, but at the same time we're very protective over what we have to do in order to just enhance our path rather than the collective. And I think it's a big challenge in modern cricket. You've got the IPL, you've got all these leagues that are sprouting up. And so if I go to the SA20 and I'm not in the IPL yet and I perform in the SA20, well, then maybe I can get to the, maybe I can get into the IPL. And maybe I can get into the 100 or the CPL, and I can have more of these playing opportunities. And so the game more and more is becoming a selfish game. It's sort of, the system is gearing it towards that. And I think from a performance point of view, my sense is that if a cricketer approaches it in that way, or teams approach it in that way, we're harming ability to perform. We're not actually helping people step up to be their best. You take a sport like the NFL, and I'm American football. Careers there last only 3 years. Now I know it's a very contact sport and there could be injuries and things like that at play, but I can imagine it's, you come in, if you're not good enough, you get kicked out because there's so many people that want to, and so it becomes a struggle to make it a cohesive, trusting thing. And I think cricket, with all of these leagues and things, are heading down a similar route from that point of view, that you're in here for 2 months, and if you're not good enough, we're not seeing you again. Or if you're not delivering. And so there's this sharp, pointed edge to performance. it's like the knife edge, and if you're not delivering, you're out the door. And so to be safe and to be open and to be free becomes more difficult. And so I think what we're uncovering in these conversations is that those who are going to be able to create that in teams going forward, that are able to do that, they will ultimately also get the best performance out of cricketers at the end of the day.
So it's a really interesting comparison with the NFL, and it was a conversation I'd had with a previous cricket coach in this series, because he had spent some time over in America looking at baseball to sort of bring transferable skills. And a question that I asked him was, were they looking at the individual's characteristics and behaviours? And they weren't. They were just purely interested in the individual's score or their statistics. And baseball is a very harsh environment where you could finish a game on a Saturday, come back in on the Monday, and you've been drafted. No questions. You've just been drafted to another team. So that's the sort of rite of arc of insecurity, where I think what you're saying is we are going towards that to when we've got franchise cricket. But to challenge that, they still have winning high-performing teams. So I'd be really interested to understand how a baseball team, let's say the Yankees, I won't say my team, which is the Texas Rangers. They were successful for 1 year and then really bad the last season. But actually, there must be something in there that they are still able to create a team, and it's quite an individual sport, similar to cricket, of high-performing individuals. And I don't have any contacts out there or any leads in there, but I'd be really interested to understand how they create that.
Have you ever looked into the Chicago Cubs story about how they broke the curse, the 100 and whatever year curse? So the last time they won a World Series, I think it was around 1910. Right. It was maybe either 105 or 115 year curse. They called it a curse. So that's how long it took from one World Series win to another for the Chicago Cubs. And so I looked into that a little bit, read a couple of books, obviously watched some YouTube videos, etc., to try and understand a little bit about that. And one of the things that stood out for me was they hired a guy by the name of Theo Epstein, who had gotten the Red Sox to win a World Series. And one of the things he did when he got into the Chicago Cubs was he changed. I mean, there's many things he changed, but one of the big things that he changed was he changed the way that they scouted talent. So instead of having just the metrics of stats and having their scouts come in and sort of just talk about that, what he got the scouts to start doing is he said, no, I'm looking for specific type of people. And one of the characteristics, there was three characteristics, like that was the core essence of what they were looking for. But one of them was when a player sort of fails in performance and the team wins and they're still happy, or do they fail in performance and they're miserable when the team wins? And so what the scouts had to do was go to their grandparents, go to their parents, go to their schoolmates, go to their church pastor, go to family, and sort of ask about who the person is. And they picked on character, obviously still skill, because we're playing baseball. It's not just, okay, you're this great person, but you've got no baseball skill. Yep. And so that's how they started building that team. They were looking for specific characters to build a cohesive team environment for the task at hand. And I think in 2015 or 2016, they won the World Series with those players. And I thought that's fascinating. You hear stories about the All Blacks under Richie McCaw, where the character was sort of a high-level thing that they used to pick you. You'd come into the team, but you'd get kicked out if you don't fit, because there's a lot of good rugby players around. And I've had lots of conversations with sort of people here in South Africa about that. I don't think we pick like that. I still think we just pick on skill. And at times we've got to balance the color thing still. That's still a thing. At all ages, that's got to be there. Personally, I don't have anything against it. I just don't know if it's always executed really well, because people get harmed in that sort of a process. Yeah, too, the relationships suffer. You push somebody into a place when maybe they're not quite ready. Not saying they're a bad cricketer, but they might just not be ready for that yet. That's where I get a little bit iffy with our situation. But so I don't think we're anywhere near picking people on character in our country yet. I think that's a ways down the road still to go.
Yeah, it's got to be a real hard sort of metric to be able to introduce when it is a profession and it is a business, and that has got to, at the top end of sport, has got to have an influence on teams in terms of who is selected, who isn't. And I think that would be really difficult to really bring that in for some players, and I can think of some cricketers that are probably character-wise you wouldn't go with them. In your head against your heart approach sometimes can be a real difficult sort of decision to make. Moving on from that, then, what does, from all the sort of conversations that you've had and where you are in your understanding, what to you is accountability? What does that mean to you? What does the word accountability mean to you for players or for high performers?
Yeah, accountability. The traditional take on that is, where I come from, the sort of world I play in, is normally you'd find somebody like an accountability partner, and so it gets painted as this picture that I need somebody else that I can be accountable to.
Okay.
And so how I prefer to look at it, or what my understanding about it is more that accountability is accountability to self first. So if you say you're going to do something, then you do that. That is accountability. To me, it the fact that you might need somebody else to keep you accountable, you need a coach to keep you accountable, to tell you, did you do your push-ups today? Did you do your... To me, that's not accountability. Taking accountability says, hey, coach, I've done my push-ups today. That's accountability to me. It's the cricketer or the person saying, I'm going to start being at account for the things that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so if I said I'm going to do something, I don't need anybody else to keep me to account, but I'm going to hold myself accountable. And one of the ways that I can do that is to somebody else. There's many other ways that you could do that. You could do that through journaling and being real and honest with yourself there. You can do that with a partner. You can do that with your teammates.
Yeah.
You could just do it by yourself on your phone, and you say, right, I'm going to do this. Check that box. I've done it. To me, then you're busy being accountable, because you're holding yourself to account for the things you say you're going to do. If tomorrow's an exercise day, did I get my exercise in? If tomorrow's a rest day, did I get my rest in? Even that's difficult for some.
Yeah. And for me, it's the ability to answer to. You could answer to yourself. You could answer to somebody else. And, and sometimes it's looked upon as, you've got to be accountable to one person, but actually it's a two-way. If you are using somebody else, accountability is a two-way relationship and connection. Although one person might be responsible for something, and let's say somebody does something for me, I'm going to hold myself accountable to check in with them, whilst they're holding themselves accountable to execute what they've been asked or tasked to do. And I think that's also true. And we've taken this approach in the military recently about leadership. You can't lead somebody else unless you can self-lead, unless you can hold, unless you can have our core values in the Navy, in the military here, is courage, commitment, respect, discipline, integrity, and loyalty. And unless you can lead yourself in those areas, your ability and your credibility to lead somebody else is devalued. You can't lead others until you lead yourself. Have you looked at, or what's your view on leadership then? What does leadership mean to you? Because I think if we put it into the cricket context, Our captain wears many hats: a tactician, a tactical executor of a skill. On the pitch, has to make decisions, has to understand and read the game, has to be able to influence the game, but also they're a captain off the pitch as well. They're a leader off the pitch. But when it comes to high performance, and let's talk high performance teams, how does leadership play that sort of a part in there?
I would imagine that one or two of the teams that I was involved with, and we sort of pushed the idea of leadership towards the cricketers. Because in a game like cricket, the captain, as you rightly say, plays a big part.
Yeah.
I mean, even the coach becomes null and void when you go on the field. The captain essentially he's the captain of the ship. And so one of the things that I'm fond of from a leadership point of view is, so my perception would be, maybe just to rewind a little bit, would be around leading of your own space, sort of similar lines to what you said, right? That ability to lead yourself. And maybe it can be in small things, like, is my area in the change room clean? When I'm on the field, am I carrying myself? If I get hit for 6, I'm not the captain of the team, but how am I responding to the things that are happening in my environment? If I drop a catch, what am I doing? Am I moping for the rest of the day, or am I leading you?
Yeah.
If I got out for a duck, am I walking around on the field when it's fielding time like I don't want to be there anymore? Or am I leading myself well on the field? When I'm busy batting, am I leading in my capacity as a batter for the team? Or am I waiting for somebody else to tell me what to do,
Yeah.
And so I think it's that idea of leading in your own space. But one of the things I enjoy doing within a team space is to provide leadership to more than one person. So yes, we have a captain and to make what people are responsible for, because a big part of leadership is being able to take responsibility. What am I responsible for? What am I not responsible for? Often we make captains the type of person that's over responsible. They take everybody, they'll be responsible for everything. Okay, you're the captain, off you go. And that's not necessarily healthy, because people who are over responsible make the people around them under responsible. And so I think a healthy strategy to use in teams is to see what other leadership roles can we define within the team. So with young cricketers, as an example, I've had offside leader, leg side leader.
Yep.
Yeah. Who's leading the field and the energy on the offside, and who's doing that on the leg side? So not just one person that's responsible for everyone. Maybe have 2 people, and they can connect with each other, and they are responsible for their half of the field. Have a social leader,
Yep.
And it could be a group. It could be like, you 3, we're going to have a full season of 6 months over here. You 3, you're responsible for all social activities, and then you support them in learning to lead in that domain as the coach. So hey, when's our social activity coming? How are you going to find out what the team wants to do? And so you can then guide them to leading effectively in that space. So maybe it's a Tempum bowling, or a movie night, or in South Africa, a braai at somebody's house, or a swim at the beach, or whatever. It doesn't have to be things that cost a lot of money, but we agree maybe ahead of time, right? You got to have four social events for us through the year. You can come up with what they are. We discuss it as a team, but you guys are responsible for that. Things like tactics and strategy, maybe through a season, give leadership to the whole team to come up with tactics and strategies. Maybe 2 or 3 players for 2 or 3 weeks, that's your responsibility. Then the next group, because in that way we get the whole team to start thinking tactics and strategy, not just the captain. Well, I can't think in this immediate moment of other things that I've done, but I like to say, if we're looking at developing leaders, if you're only going to look at developing your captain over a 6-month period, if you're a coach of a younger team, you've developed one leader maybe over 6 months. When this way, you can sort of enhance, hopefully, the leadership capacity of all the members in the team and support all of them in their own spaces to lead a little bit better. And you never know what you unearth. You just give somebody an opportunity and they find a little something, and then, well, next year they're the captain, and off you go.
I think what really landed with me there was at the very start when you were talking about, and sort of summarise it, is the discipline of staying in your swim lane. And that sometimes can be a challenge. You get some leaders who want to take everything on. You get some leaders who just completely disconnect from it, and it's having that oversight as a coach to are they still in their swim lane? Taking that step back and then understanding what the impact is on either the individual or the individual's connections with the person that they're affecting, or the team's ability to react to when that person steps outside their swim lane, when they're given that leadership role. Because it can be quite powerful to empower people, to take on leadership roles. I note that it's 50 minutes. I could absolutely carry on talking about all sorts of other areas that we've got it down, but I'm going to finish with two questions, and however you answer them, it might come from the heart, might come from the head. To you, then, what are the non-negotiables for high performance?
Sure, that's a big question in my
Yeah,
head.
and it could be characteristics, it could be values, it could be process, it could be execute. Absolutely everything. But or have you seen any common themes from people that you've engaged with that you think might be non-negotiables?
I think for high performance to be there, it's good that you sort of add on little bits, because then it gets my head going in a direction. So I don't think you can have high performance with low levels of skill.
Okay.
My perception is that the understanding of how talent develops is a bit warped by most cricketers, because they would look around and say, oh, I'm not as good as that one. Where skill is something that you can gain if you work at it and you understand, it's not about just putting in the hours, putting in the effort. So a non-negotiable to me would be you become insanely good. And that would mean that you're working hard, you're putting in the hours, you're putting in the effort. I've seen cricketers not be able to run a yo-yo or a bleep test in the right amount of time. And then they go put in the work and they get their time done. That, at some level, is high performance. And so I don't like talking about putting in the effort, because I think that sort of has been trodden through quite a lot, and people know, we must work hard. I prefer to say, just go make yourself insanely good and do whatever that takes, And then secondly, I would definitely say, and I think I've mentioned it earlier, but to me, from a mental point of view, a non-negotiable is an ability to understand yourself when you're at your best. What is that actually? I think earlier in our conversation, you sort of raised, and normally we do this as coaches, we'll call a cricketer over when things go wrong. And we'll say, hey, what were you thinking there? We fail to at times ask them, hey, remember a time when you were at your best? What were you thinking then?
Yeah.
And can we think that more? And can we feel that more? And can we show up like that more? And what do we need to do in order to get ourselves there? Now, for some, it might mean developing breathing strategies. For others, it might be a mindfulness practice. For somebody else, it's regular journaling. For somebody else, it's visualization. For somebody else, it's a run down the road. For somebody else, it's a walk in nature. For somebody else, do what you need to do to get yourself closer and closer to that place where you're at your best. And I think that's neglected in high performance. High performance, like I said to me earlier, is it focuses on this hard work side. Get fit, get strong. A non-negotiable most probably would be getting better. You have to look to improve. If you're not looking to improve, so becoming insanely good, that would be sort of a byproduct of that. If I'm looking to become as good as I can be, I'm working, I've got that, but I'm also looking for ways to step it up. not just in a skill space, but also in an understanding of myself. How am I when I'm at my best, and how can I be there more often?
Okay, that ties really nicely then into the last question that I'm going to ask you. You as a person then, what, let's say, over the next 6 months, are you going to start doing? What are you going to stop doing? And what are you going to continue doing?
I'm laughing because it's a really difficult question to answer at this current point in time. And maybe in 3 months' time, I could really answer it easily. Because right now I'm like in a little bit of a waiting space. There's a couple of things that are up in the air, and there's a bit of breathing room. But I'd like to think, maybe I'll answer it like this, that in 6 months' time, you asked, what am I start, what am I stopping,
yeah,
and
what are you
going to
start, what
right?
are you going to stop, and what are you going to continue?
Yeah. I would want to... See, I'm not sure if I'm already doing this, but maybe for the start one I'll go with, I want to start doing more of the things that really inspire me.
Okay.
I know it's a bit vague, but like I say, in 3 months' time, I could maybe be a bit more specific with details, but to be doing things that are actually a little bit more inspirational, you know?
Yep.
What am I going to be continuing doing? So a lot of this stuff that I speak about in terms of knowing who you are at your best and is for me in my own life very relevant. So I used to, without making it too long of an answer, but I used to be very stressed, and it's something that I wouldn't say I have a mental health issue or anything like that, but stress is sort of a constant companion. And so for me, I enjoy life more when I'm calm, when I'm relaxed, and if I have a sense of freedom. And so that's something I've been working on for the last 3 years quite extensively, in trying to understand about myself. Like, what are the things that's derailing me or taking me away from that? Yeah. And so that's certainly something that I'll continue doing. I don't think that's something that I've got mastered in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But that's definitely something I'll be continuing doing. Something that I'll stop doing in the next 6 months. Nothing really comes to my mind, like in the immediate moment.
That's fine. I will. Don't answer it, and I'll check back in to see if there is anything that you know that has presented itself. You know, it might be a takeaway for you to have a think about. But in summary, then you know that's almost been the hour, and it's been great to have you on. It's been great for you to share with us your thoughts. You know, it's great for you to be as open as you have been, but most of all, thank you very much for your time and your connection and your enthusiasm in this conversation. It's been really rich, and I'm going to really enjoy listening back and going back over it with probably with a different lens and a different time. But yeah, no, Jody, thank you very much for coming on, mate.
It's my absolute pleasure. I love being here. As always, it's not always easy to create depth in these types of conversations. So I just want to encourage anybody, if there's anything that we spoke about, whether it was some of the stuff you spoke about or I spoke about, that resonates with them, you know, to reach out to you, or maybe to contact me, or maybe to go search it on the internet, or, you know, do something with that curiosity that you maybe found in this conversation, and pull on that thread a little bit and get a little bit deeper, you know, and see where that takes you.
And if anybody does have anything that that's chimed, you know, how can they reach out to you? How can they find you on socials, or how can they contact you?
Easiest would be to go to my website, Jody Martins, just jodymartins.co, not .com, just .co.
Yeah, that's great.
Easiest.
It's and there's loads of you know, and I've been going through lots of podcasts in there. It's great to dive in and pick them up and listen to those. So yeah, keep going with what you're doing. I'm really enjoying listening to yours, and hopefully the listeners have enjoyed this episode. Cheers, buddy. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much. Cheers, Keith.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, then please like, follow and share this podcast with others. And don't forget, if you would like to feature as a coach, or you would like us to cover something, then please email us at thecricketcoachingcode@gmail.com. That's it for this week. Until next time, go well.